I just wanted to not feel like my period was trying to kill me every month from a psychological standpoint. But that happened. And then I was kind of starting to think, well, if that can happen, can I have a relationship that's stable and healthy and successful? Can I have a career? Can I be a mother at some point? Because at that point, previously, none of those things would have been a responsible choice or were possible for me. I had a mood disorder that was related to my reproductive system, and mood disorders are very volatile.
Welcome to the Wildflow podcast with me, Charlotte Puanto, certified cycle and feminine embodiment coach and shamanic womb guide. In this podcast, I'll share my wisdom and conversations with powerful change makers, thought leaders, and embodied teachers to invite you to live cyclically in flow with your menstrual cycle instead of fearing it, to heal menstrual shame and normalize womb wisdom and period positivity, and to step into your sovereign magnetic power to create and embody the change you desire to see in your world. Settle in to unleash your wild flow. Today we're shining a light on PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and this is a really common and really severe form of PMS. My guest today, Jes Hagan, is a period educator, integrative menstrual health coach, and fertility awareness method instructor. She is the chief menstruator at Her Mood Mentor, where she works both one-on-one and in group settings to empower, educate, and support menstruators to heal hormonal imbalances and reproductive mood disorders, such as PMDD. Jes's practice is built upon an integrative medicine framework and really rooted in the belief that the body has an innate capacity to heal. At Her Mood Mentor, Jes approaches the menstrual cycle as the body's fifth vital sign of health and advocates for the principles of self-efficacy, cycle awareness, body literacy, and informed consent. And in today's podcast episode, we dove really deep. It's PMDD Awareness Month in April while we're recording this. And it's so important to me that we really shine a light on how people can experience menstrual cycles so differently. And, particularly in my work and in the cycle awareness realm, there's a lot of reclamation work being done around the premenstrual phase, seeing that it does have opportunities within it. It does have strengths and gifts and magic and medicine. And it's not just this time of suffering where so many people do. But for somebody who's experiencing PMDD, suffering is so real and absolutely, completely life altering and very debilitating. So I'm really grateful for Jes to share her story of just how she has suffered with PMDD and why this has led her to do the work that she does to help people to heal their PMDD and to come into a new relationship with their body and their cycle in a really powerfully holistic way. So this is for you if you do experience PMDD or you think you might do. But also if you don't, I would really love you to listen in so that you have an awareness of what is going on, what it's like, and different ways that we can support people with PMDD, whether friends, family, clients, to go and get the help that they need to really heal something that can feel like there's just no way out. So I hope that you enjoy this and take a lot of information away. Welcome, Jes, to Wildflow. How are you today?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you, Charlotte?
I'm good, thank you. I'm on cycle day 6 today. So I'm feeling like my energy is just starting to come back. My blood is just finishing. It's the last little drips this morning. But I'm also feeling really tired. I've just had a few days, 3 solid days during my bleed of really long workshops and circles, which was incredible, but really draining for the kind of time of my cycle when I just really wanted to be so inward and not around other people, even though it was just incredible and nourishing as well. So I'm just feeling a little bit like hungover from that, I think. Just a little bit like it's that rise in energy is taking a little bit longer. And we've just had a moment to breathe and just drop in before recording. And I feel really kind of like, just a bit kind of blissful and super chilled. So yeah. And how about you? Do you have a menstrual cycle? And if so, where are you in your cycle? And if not, um, just how are you feeling in your body today? And do you relate to your cyclical nature still, even without that?
I do have a cycle. I am on day 19 of my cycle, so I'm in the luteal phase and I'm feeling it, managing much better than I have in past luteal phases, of course, dealing with, managing PMDD. So I'm happy the way that this cycle is going. I haven't been experiencing any severe menstrual symptoms, and just kind of easing into the lower energy phase and doing the best I can to just support the nature that phase of the cycle is. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And that feels like so aligned with our conversation today, which is about PMDD, so premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And this is something that you support people to understand and to heal and to kind of, I guess, manage, but for want of a better word. And so I feel like, with you being in that particular phase of your cycle is going to add a certain an extra kind of layer or lens, I guess, to our conversation. So really hear from you how you experience it, and that difference you said about having, you're feeling good at the minute, and I'd love to explore what comes up for you and the people that you work with as well, and just really dive into this conversation. My intention for this is so that people can have a greater awareness of something that is prevalent, but even if you're not somebody who experiences this, to have an awareness and an understanding, so that you can be an ally and support to people who do experience PMDD, and just understanding as well that for some people the menstrual cycle is not a great thing, and how it can just be so different for us as well. As I'd love to hear about the work you do as well. So yeah, thank you for sharing your cycle check-in. And I really just feel like that's a great place to ask you if you would just share with us, if you're happy to, a bit about your story, I guess, and what really brought you to the place of making PMDD support like the focus of your work.
It's a long story, so I will try to be concise as much as possible. It was PMDD. Of course, I didn't know what PMDD was for almost 2 decades, but at Menarche, I was already experiencing some severe mood symptoms around my first period and the subsequent periods, age 12, age 13, age 14, age 15. And it was to the point that it was abnormal. The symptoms that I was experiencing, they were severe. And my mom recognized that pretty immediately. And we sought out some guidance around that. And of course, it's not unusual to be told, well, it's going to take, some people say up to 12 years for a menstrual cycle to fully mature and normalize, and for the symptoms around the cycle to kind of regulate. But I couldn't manage. So by the time I was 15, I was put on hormonal contraceptives in order to manage the symptoms. And I did have physical symptoms, but mostly what PMDD is talking about psychological symptoms, because it's a reproductive mood disorder. still age 15, I didn't know what PMDD was. I was just told this is PMS and the pill will help you. That wasn't my experience with the pill. I had a lot of negative side effects, and I tried many different forms of contraceptive, and some of them exacerbated my symptoms very severely. So it became clear that that wasn't really an option. Even though I gave that up as an option for many years, I did come back to it later when I was desperate. And again, I had a really, really negative experience in my late 20s getting back on hormonal contraceptives, and it massively exacerbating my symptoms, and the physician telling me to stay on it. It will take a while to regulate. But at that time, I was experiencing increasing suicidal ideation on the medication. And so I was not going to continue taking it. Of course, that was not the right suggestion for them to make in my point of view. So I pretty much at that point fully abandoned the allopathic treatment protocols for PMDD. That was still before I had a PMDD diagnosis or was able to connect the dots that this was in fact a reproductive mood disorder that I was dealing with. But in the meantime, I was misdiagnosed as bipolar, lots of ADHD, major depression, put on antipsychotics, put on SSRIs, the whole gamut. And none of those things were the right option for me, and they didn't alleviate my symptoms, and they just kind of came with more unwanted symptoms. So after that rock bottom point in my late 20s, I had lost the relationship that I was one of the reasons I got back on the birth control. I lost my job. I was in bed. Instead of being in bed for 2 weeks of the month, I was in bed for 2 months while I tried to be on the birth control. And it was just kind of the dark night for me, where I had the realization where, either this maybe will be the end of me, right? Because I have no more treatment options. I'm out of options clearly, or I have to figure out something else. Like there has to be something else. I cannot continue to live my life this way. There's nothing about this that is normal. And so at that point, I began heavily researching and experimenting with different integrative protocols. And within 3 months, I had the first symptom-free period that I had ever had for 17 years. That was 17 years I dealt with PMDD. And then 3 months into experimenting with lifestyle and diet medicine, I had my period come without any symptoms. And at that point, that was a really transformational moment, because I never thought that was going to be possible. I was never looking to completely disappear my symptoms. I didn't think that would ever happen. I just wanted to not feel like my period was trying to kill me every month from a psychological standpoint. But that happened. And then I was kind of starting to think, well, if that can happen, can I have a relationship that's stable and healthy and successful? Can I have a career? Can I be a mother at some point? Because at that point, previously, none of those things would have been a responsible choice or were possible for me. I had a mood disorder that was related to my reproductive system, and mood disorders are very volatile, any mood disorder that you talk about. So it's not unusual that it would be hard to have a job or keep a healthy relationship because you're dealing with severe psychological symptoms. The thing that's different from PMDD to other mood disorders is that because it's hormone related, it's very predictable, which is actually a super positive thing, because if you're dealing with a bipolar mood disorder, other mood disorders, they kind of come and go at their own whim. But with PMDD, it's a pattern. And when you see the pattern and you learn more about the body systems that are playing into your reproductive health and how to support them, you can reduce your symptoms and, most of all, gain skills and tools to manage those symptoms. So not a short story.
Thank you. Wow, for sharing that. I'm really moved. I'm really touched by just how bad and debilitating that has been for you, and for so long to live with that without any improvement, and just treatment options suggested to you just actually making it worse. It's there, but it's it brings either extra side effects or it's actually just worse. Wow.
Which is something that a lot of gynecologists and general practitioners, as they're treating this disorder, they don't have that awareness. And so they're not communicating that to their patients, and they're not screening for that once they are on the medication. And so that's something I really work hard with my clients, regardless of which protocols they decide to put in place, or whether they choose allopathic treatment programs or not. It's kind of like, you need to be tracking your symptoms, because a supplement even can exacerbate your symptoms. A natural progesterone cream can exacerbate your symptoms. So we want to be monitoring exactly how the modality that you're putting in place is affecting your cycle, because we don't want you spending money or making major life style behavior changes if they're not clearly impacting your symptom presentation, which it takes a little while to see that, but it's really easy to have a few months go by as you're on a protocol and be like, oh, I think I feel better, or I think I feel worse, but I don't really know. That's not data, and that's not super helpful. So to be able to be clearly charting and monitoring, I think that that's a really important piece of the puzzle, regardless of if you're dealing with endometriosis, PCOS, any other condition, to just be monitoring the effects of what things you're actually trying, so that you can get a clear, true picture of how they're affecting you.
Yeah, that's really, really wise advice there. I completely see how that would be really powerful, for you to start drawing out the pictures, but then for whoever you're working with as well, whether that's someone like you or even, a GP or gynecologist, to be like, look, this is like evidence. This is not me kind of doing my best to remember. It's fact. It's, it's all there. So yeah, amazing advice. So just to jump into, PMDD a little bit more, and like you said that you started experiencing it right at your first bleed, and then every cycle, and then for years and years. And, you've said that it's, a reproductive disorder. You said that it was a mood disorder. And, it's not PMS. Like, could you just speak to a little bit more about like what it is, and also what it is not? Just to clarify,
Sure.
myth bust. Thank you.
Yeah. So PMDD is a cyclical reproductive mood disorder that affects around, they're estimating 5.5% of people who menstruate. So that's around 1 in 20 of those people. But I suspect that statistic is much higher, because 90% of cases are undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. It seems
really common with all kinds of things, doesn't it, related to menstrual cycles and women's health? Yeah.
A lack of research overall. It affects people during their reproductive years, of course, and it presents symptoms during the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle. So there are 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, and PMDD is presenting in the premenstrual phase, which is about 10 to 14 days before you bleed, and symptoms can be presenting, 6 days, 7 days, or a full 14 days. And a kind of clear sign with PMDD is that it flips on like a light switch, and it flips off like a light switch. So post-ovulation, your estrogen levels drop, and that's where progesterone begins to rise, and you have a sensitivity to that fluctuation. And that's when you start experiencing physical and psychological symptoms. And then again, at the end of the luteal phase, your hormones, progesterone and all your other hormones, drop to their lowest level in the cycle. And that's pretty immediately. People often feel a relief from those symptoms. So in the PMDD community, it is the bleed. When the bleed comes, that is kind of your saving grace. Whereas in society, a lot of times the mentality around the menstrual cycle is that the menstrual cycle phase is the terrible one, but often it's the premenstrual phase. It certainly is for people with PMDD, but a lot of times if you're experiencing PMS or other period symptoms and cycle symptoms, a lot of times they're presenting before menstruation. Yeah. PMS is much less severe. So 90% of people report experiencing PMS symptoms. And there is some symptom overlap between PMS and PMDD. Things like anxiety and depression and a lot of the physical symptoms. But the difference is that PMS isn't debilitating, whereas the PMDD symptoms are severe enough that they impact your ability to go about your day or live your normal life. And things like suicidal ideation, self-harm behaviors are much higher in people with PMDD than that's usually not a symptom that's present in PMS symptoms. So it's kind of like a spectrum. They're not the same thing, but unchecked for long enough, PMS symptoms can look more like PMDD. So much to say. I could just go on and on.
Yeah, thank you. So really hearing that it's, presented like there's physical symptoms, but it's the psychological symptoms that are the most debilitating, and, it's spectrum where, it can be like PMS on one side and PMDD on the other, even though they are different. One can lead to the other, but it's that real sense of debilitation and not being able to get out of bed, participate in life. You spoke earlier on about, holding a job, having a relationship, parenting, like, not feeling that you can, you said about responsible choices, like not feeling that you are capable of doing those things.
Yeah. And the duration as well, because usually with PMS symptoms, people are experiencing PMS, 3 days before they bleed, maybe 5, but a lot of times people with PMDD are suffering for 2 weeks, which is half of the month, which is half of their menstruating life, which is a lot of days and months and years, and then all added up.
Yeah, that's really severe, isn't it? That's really impacting. I can't imagine. I don't experience that myself, but just that is like loss of half of your life, like you said, to just, yeah. And I can just really imagine that if you experience this, then absolutely your menstrual cycle would just be something that you would really struggle to, to embrace, really. Yeah. So, but hearing as well that, kind of taking, pills that would switch off the cycle aren't really helping either. So, you said on your website, it's a beautiful website. I really liked your website. You said, if you take control of your hormones, you can take control of your life. So you spoke about that sensitivity to estrogen and progesterone at the start of the luteal phase, the premenstrual phase. Could you just speak to a bit about what's kind of going on there on a hormonal level? And, I guess really, you're taking a more alternative approach to healing PMDD, and you and your specific work, you are weaving together different modalities. Yeah, I just would love to hear you speak to, how you support, like how the hormones are contributing, like you said about the sensitivity, but I guess what's kind of causing this the sensitivity as well.
Well, first of all, PMDD, that's such a good question. And so there's so much to say about all of these wonderful questions. But a distinction to make is that PMDD is not a hormone imbalance, it's a hormone disorder. But that said, there is no blood, urine, saliva test to determine that you have a true neurological or genetic persistent case of premenstrual dysphoric disorder that wouldn't benefit from hormone balancing lifestyle changes. And the reality is, just in the world that we're living in, modernity, soil degradation, quality that's affecting the quality of our food, all of these things, a lot of people are experiencing hormone imbalances. The hormones change every day of the month. So even if you do a hormone test and things come back normal, that doesn't mean that they're optimal. And that doesn't mean that they're optimal every month. Every month is different. Every day is different. Your stress, your exposure to any illness, travel, everything impacts your individual cycle, as you know. So we can all benefit. I think a lot of times a limiting mindset comes around, and I see this in a lot of PMDD online support communities where people say, well, this is a neurological condition or this is a genetic condition. So there's that. And your only options again are SSRIs or hormonal contraceptives. But the reality is those aren't root cause treatments, and working to support your body systems that create your reproductive function will reduce your symptoms. I never like to talk about cures because I think that first of all, there's no proven cure for PMDD. So I work from a scientific evidence-based background. I'm really serious about that. All the modalities that I teach and everything like that is, has the science to back it. So I also think it's a limiting mindset to think like, oh, we need to look for a cure. No, what we really want to do is improve our quality of life. If we could disappear our symptoms and there was an easy fix, we would know about it by now. And the causality behind everyone's PMDD can be vastly different because of genetic factors, because of lifestyle and diet, because of their levels of hormone imbalance. But something else that's pretty clear in the PMDD research is trauma. So childhood trauma or a history of sexual abuse, it's reported that you're 6.7 times more likely to experience PMDD symptoms if you have experienced trauma or sexual abuse, and who hasn't experienced trauma. So I think this impacts a lot of really sensitive people, and it's a complex. There are a lot of complex factors that are playing into their symptom presentation, but I take the approach that I do because I truly believe that the body has an innate capacity to heal, which is what integrative medicine is. And I believe that when you support the underlying systems that facilitate your reproductive health, like I've said multiple times, that will help reduce and manage your symptoms. So so many avenues to go to from there, but that's a little bit more in-depth information about what might be causing it and how it presents.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's really profound that, that's 1 in 20 people suffering. The number just not being, like, from what you've said, like definitely not being diagnosed at, in its true rate. And then that many people having experienced, that correlation between childhood trauma and PMDD. It's just, I really, really can feel that, our bodies are sensitive as well, right? So, the hormones are being like the physical thing that's like, actually driving the PMDD, but beneath that, like you said, hormones are influenced by, so many things going on psychologically and emotionally and lifestyle and food and stress and all of those things. And, like you said about the root cause, like underneath it, what our body is, trying to keep in balance. And that's essentially what, our hormones are for. It's to try and keep us in that sense of balance. And, if our body or nervous system or whatever is stressed or carrying that, emotional, trauma or stress or whatever it is, then just really seeing that as like this cascade that's driving it. So the work that you do, I see that you do, functional nutrition, but also you bring in botanical medicine and herbalism into your work as well, which I think is really beautiful. And, I'd love to just hear you speak a little bit about, how that, I'm really curious as well about the botanical medicine and herbalism aspect. Like, how does that support somebody to explore and, support their PMDD?
I'm having so many thoughts. Well, first, the thing that comes up, and this is something that I try to draw a lot of awareness to, is that symptom presentation is kind of your body communicating to you. That's the way that, if you get a fever, that's your body saying, something is wrong. This is a vital sign. We need to address this right away. It's very serious. And I tell people all the time, and I'm sure but the menstrual cycle was identified as a vital sign in 2015 by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. And so we can kind of shift to taking the menstrual cycle really seriously and recognizing that these symptoms are telling us something, and symptoms are clues pointing to different body systems. And it's not as simple as, well, if you have breast tenderness, it means this for sure, but it's giving us some ideas of what could be going on. And so I kind of use this within my protocol to help people identify what their symptoms are telling them and using the body literacy around that. And I love to pull botanical medicine into that as a way to kind of reconnect to nature, as a way to actively do a practice that's nourishing, that's also related to powerful medicinal plants. There's no question around the efficacy of a lot of ancient medicinal herbal practices. So, but that being said, I say the same thing about supplements as well, or self-care practices. It doesn't really matter how many supplements you take or how many skincare fancy routines you do, or how many herbal remedies you put into practice. If you're not addressing some underlying foundational reproductive health basics, you're not going to get the full effect of incorporating those other modalities. Not that they're not helping and that they're effective, but you can't just eat McDonald's every day and take a supplement and think you're going to feel better. It's more complex than that. Your body systems are more complex. But there are a lot of powerful herbal remedies. I specifically really like cluing people in about adaptogens as a way to help them manage and regulate their nervous system and their stress response. So that's kind of one of the botanical medicine routes that I take, as well as different tonics that I teach people how to make using teas and other herbal remedies. And I think it's a nice way for people to connect with their bodies, because some of those tonics are fiery and you will feel them going down, and the effects are significant, especially if you're dealing with gut microbiome issues, gut dysbiosis, things like that. But I really like to take a full kind of zoomed out approach where we look at the 7 core areas of hormone health, which is my model of kind of determining where people are falling within their symptom presentation and their lifestyle and diet practices, to see kind of what's going on here. Where can we improve your behaviors and your lifestyles in order to better support those underlying body systems and ultimately your reproductive health. And I do just want to point out, because we talked about hormone imbalances, and while PMDD isn't that, if you go in and you look at, okay, what are the symptoms of estrogen dominance, which is a very common hormone imbalance that people experience, the symptoms of that are very similar to PMDD. Many of them are the same. Same with progesterone deficiency. Of course, each of these have their unique flavors, but that's kind of where I think it's really important to kind of disconnect from this mentality that I have PMDD and that's who I am. And because it limits you in your healing when you over-identify with a disorder. There is a part of the healing process that's so important when you're able to point to something. That's the name of the thing that I experience. And you're able to distance yourself as you see, I experience all of those symptoms. How can that even be that that's related to my cycle? And you get into support groups and you see other menstruators experiencing the same symptoms. And you're like, what? How is, experiencing interpersonal conflicts, 2:00 pattern where I'm breaking up with my partner every month or something like that. I mean, a lot of people are experiencing that every month. And how is that related? There's a process where recognizing PMDD and recognizing it's something that you are experiencing is really important. But I think there's a lot of spirituality work that comes in keeping a boundary between having something and being something. Because if you are something, how can you be something else?
I think that's really profound. Yeah, it's not fixed. Like it's not defining you for your whole life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love what you've described there, the way that you approach this, like this really holistic view that's like, looking at like, your gut biome, etc. And, this sense of self-care that I can hear there as well, and the spiritual approach and, supporting yourself with, these herbal tonics and medicines as well to, support all of that healing, but really hearing just, the kind of, like you say, like the mindset of work as well that's involved of like disconnecting, stepping back from, that you say, defining yourself as like, I have this, like I am this. The kind of difference between what you're experiencing versus who you are. That's really powerful. Thank you.
It becomes so traumatic. It becomes something that you fear every month and this is something that I talk with my clients about, where you kind of have pre-menarche trauma, where you have trauma in your childhood before your period or around your period that impacts the presentation of your cycle every month and impacts your mental health. Of course, we know from the ACE childhood screening test and how that plays out in people in their adult lives with alcoholism and stuff like that. But so that's there, and we can't do much about that other than working on nervous system regulation and healing trauma. And I have a lot of modalities that I am proponents of around that. But then you get into the trauma that occurs every month when you have your cycle. And people with endo have this. It's more of a physical trauma, still trauma. It's not any more or less traumatic for each individual, but people are experiencing this with PMDD, with psychological symptoms, and people experience this with mood disorders just across the board, where you lose a sense of who you are, you engage in risky behaviors, you turn to things to cope that further exacerbate your symptoms and make you more impulsive. You become seriously depressed, you harm yourself in various ways, you hurt the people around you, you lose the people around you. And after you don't have to go through very many cycles of an episodic event happening where you start to become very afraid of yourself, lose a sense of who you are, and fear becomes embedded in your menstrual cycle experience. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done. And I put that in the spirituality core area because I think that impacts your purpose and meaning in the world. But that also falls into the relationship core area, where of course, your relationships with other people, but your relationship with yourself, and working on automatic negative thoughts. Because I think people with PMS experience this a little bit, but it becomes very severe where in the luteal phase, when progesterone is high, and I'm curious to hear if you experience any of this, not having a PMDD diagnosis and knowing that you're not experiencing the severity, but where you just start to, like yourself a little bit less and start to think maybe everybody else likes me a little bit less too. And that starts spiraling. And does that?
Yeah. So there comes to a point for me. I've done a lot of kind of inner work, I guess, to appreciate myself, like all of myself, and value all of myself. But the premenstrual phase is absolutely the part where I am most likely to not like myself, or it feels like it manifests as a lot of self-doubt, and like uncertainty, and like a loss of clarity as well. So there is a sense of like, I sort of noticed last week when I was premenstrual, particularly the days beforehand, I feel a bit more like my body language is a bit more like I'm kind of, I retreat and I'm like, oh, I'm not sure, like my shoulders round, that's what I'm doing. I'm kind of curling up into a ball, and I'm like, my head lowers, and it's like vulnerability. It's like this real sense of like, I just don't know, like if I do this. And I think the fears that come up are related to rejection, like not being, I wouldn't say not being liked, but like not, like some sort of sense of like, a rejection, I think is like the root of it. That's when that comes up, and it doesn't come up at any other time.
You articulated that so well.
No, thanks.
But I think what happens with people who are experiencing PMDD is it's a more severe version of that, but I think that they have a misunderstanding that there isn't a thread of that is part of the menstrual cycle and part of progesterone's qualities. And another thing that my training in school was biological anthropology. So I am obsessed with the evolutionary lineage of how we evolved and all of this. So I'm always trying to tie this back to biology and the anthropology aspects. But I think people get confused and think, oh, I should just feel amazing all month. And that's a lack of reproductive health education. And I didn't know that when I got into this. But once I started realizing, so the menstrual cycle is a certain way, hormones make you feel differently. There are biological adaptations to make that happen. You feel great when your estrogen is high and you're social and you're able to talk and communicate your thoughts super well, which I'm obviously not in that phase.
Yeah, same.
You can't tell. But that is adaptive for a reason, because you also look better, your skin is clear, your features are more symmetrical, you have more energy. Well, there's a reason for that, and it's because your body's trying to get you pregnant in a back behind the scenes kind of way. And then the same is holding true in the luteal phase when your progesterone is high, because your body doesn't know if you conceived or not. So it's going to kind of shut down a lot of those energies that were present in the estrogenic phase, because you don't want to be going out, partying, taking on risky behaviors, chatting up a bunch of strangers, because you're exposing yourself to pathogens. You also need to conserve your energy because you may be pregnant. There's just different qualities. And so I think that having more education around the cycle and understanding the body literacy, not only behind all of these other things that are playing into your reproductive health, like sleep and endocrine disrupting chemicals and systems of elimination. And, I thoroughly excavate all of these topics with my students, but just a basic understanding of this is how the cycle works. And you should expect to feel differently, and you should expect to provide and support your body differently, because sex hormones and all hormones massively impact who you are as an individual, how you feel, how you behave, everything. So there's just a lack of understanding of how powerful those hormones are. And then once you start to realize that, you can realize, no wonder I'm feeling so extreme, because if a hormone can make you feel this when it's regulated, if it's dysregulated or I'm having an oversensitivity to it, the only place to go is really like a sharp spiral down from what's already present. So that's kind of where the coping skills and tools come in as well.
You've explained that in such a clever way there that I can really relate to that. And yeah, I love the way as well that you explained that, you know, how our hormones change and like why, and then why we have that premenstrual experience of being more like inwards and kind of slower, and like, you know, I guess protecting ourselves in case there like conceptions occurred, you know, like we wouldn't want to be going out and like, you know, like you say, doing risky shit when we're meant to be like, oh, you know, we might be going into mother phase, like let's, you know, and all those kind of qualities of nurturing. Yeah, I 100% agree. Like there's just, I think, you know, not talking about PMDD as such, but generally the reason I think so many people struggle, you know, with the premenstrual phase is that like we just don't value that part of the cycle, that version of us. Like that's not productive, that's not attractive, that's not like contributing in any way. That's just like weak and, you know, pointless, and you know, it can make us feel like, bring up a lot of shame in ourselves. And like you say, if we don't understand, we don't like it, we're fighting against it, instead of actually really leaning into what it can give us, like that are opportunities within that. But with PMDD, it's clear that those opportunities or whatever, that experience doesn't come. Like it's so intense and debilitating potentially that, you know, it's this kind of just surviving that time of the cycle. But love that you bring into your work as well, like this is normal, like you will feel different and that's okay, like you will feel different and like you're meant to, kind of thing. So like reclaiming that and like loving that, welcoming in that part of the cycle as part of, you know, all the work you're doing as well, like to actually support the hormones, I guess. Powerful stuff. Something else you said on your website, I just really love this quote. It shouldn't be an act of feminism to know how your body works. It shouldn't be an act of feminism to ask for help when you're suffering. That just really, I'm like, yes, but also like, oh, tender, like want to hold my heart and kind of like, I really, really feel that, you know. And I guess I just, you know, wonder from your perspective, you know, in the PMDD world as well, you know, it's so hard for people to ask for help. And, you know, I'm hearing that when people have asked for help, like you have, and, you know, I don't want to generalize, but, you know, kind of feeling that it's really common for people with PMDD, you know, you're like, this is definitely not normal. You go and get help, and then you get these solutions or the, you know, non-solutions, these suggestions for treatments that are not working. And you said there's not the screening, and it's the, like, this is the path that's being taken. And, you know, I just wonder, like, you know, this act of like, you know, understanding, you just spoke to understanding, and then for asking, you know, help, like generally we're rubbish at asking for help. You know, I feel like this just, does this feed into PMDD, you know, and make it worse? And, you know, like sort of this powerlessness, I guess, or like this not being able to reach out. I feel like, you know, is there something in that for people with PMDD, like learning to like advocate for yourself, I guess?
Yeah, it's very challenging. And I think it's increasingly challenging as you do reach out for support and practitioners are uneducated on it, or they only give you those two options, or it still happens where practitioners, because they don't know about it, it doesn't exist to them. And that's just, there's so many things about allopathic medicine. I'm not anti-allopathic medicine. Allopathic protocols fall within integrative medicine. Integrative medicine considers all approaches, all treatment modalities, but is always going to go for ones that don't alter your physiology first, and testing and things like that before you would get to taking medication, a prescription medication. But it's devastating when you finally go and you reach out for help and you try to communicate how severe your symptoms are, and people say, well, it's just PMS, or, we'll just take this and it will get better, and then it doesn't get better. I mean, it's kind of a black hole, and it's really hard if you go by yourself alone to those appointments, because it's hard to advocate for yourself. You forget the questions that you're going to ask. You're stressed, you're in fight or flight, and they only have 8 to 10 minutes to spend with you. And unfortunately, I think that's why I chose the path that I did. I have a really close friend who's a gynecologist, and we talk about this all the time, because she's still wants to become more of an integrative type of gynecologist. But I didn't take that route because of my personal experience, and because I don't want to prescribe treatment that is like that. I want to teach people how to heal their body systems, and I want to educate people. Most of all, I'm very passionate about education around reproductive health, because you don't get it. And I understand why you don't get it. I wouldn't want my child going to school and getting just any random person's curriculum of reproductive health education potentially. But because we don't get that, our parents don't get that, and then there's no education being passed down for children to really understand their reproductive health. But the reality is that suffering monthly because of a natural biological process to the point that you cannot function, whether it be physical or psychological, is not normal. It may be common, but we did not evolve for over 500 million years or more, and perpetuate our species and thrive to suffer. Like, that's just not, there's nothing adaptive in biology about that. So I truly believe that that's where your symptoms are sending you a message, and that creating that new language of symptom empowerment, where instead of feeling so victimized, which is hard to do, that's why you need to work with a variety of practitioners, and you need to get the education, because it's not as easy as, well, just stop being victimized by your symptoms and move on. Like, you have to get support, but there are people out there who can facilitate that and help you navigate that process. That's very validating and very hopeful, because the truth at the end of the day is you do not only have 2 treatment options. That's just a flat out lie. And they don't have the time to educate you. They don't have that education to educate you. And that's not what allopathic medicine is. Allopathic treats symptoms. So they're just doing their job. And if you're not happy with that approach, which I wasn't, a lot of people weren't, it's not really on them. That's just how the modern medical industrial complex works. But something I think people don't know that's really cool is that naturopaths, which are covered by many healthcare providers and insurance companies in the United States. I'm not sure how this works. I know that there's different, I think a naturopath means a different thing in Australia than it does in the States and in Canada. But in the States, if you're a naturopath, you can prescribe medication, and you are trained in gynecology. So and a lot of insurance companies are covering this. So you can just go in through your insurance company, seek out a naturopath or an integrative practitioner or functional medicine doctor, and they can do anything. Not gynecological surgeries probably, but they can do your monthly or your yearly exam, and they can run your blood tests, and they can prescribe you medication and everything that your regular gynecologist would do. But they operate from a different paradigm, which is more integrative, that's going to kind of zoom out and look at, like, okay, well, what is going on here? Let's take a deeper look before we just hand another topical medication that comes potentially with very dangerous and deleterious effects on your overall health, that's going to be a last resort.
Oh,
and I wish that was more.
Yeah. Oh, that's just, I really feel your passion for this and the work and but, really coming from your own experience and your own, that memory of how it felt for you to go and be given like these two options that are they weren't helpful for you. And there's so much more that can be done. I'm really pleased to hear that in the US, like a naturopath can do so much for you. In Australia, like I'm not a naturopath. I have seen a naturopath, and we have Medicare, so it's not the same as insurance. But a lot of alternative quote medicines and practitioners, allied health, have been taken off funding. Like you can't get I'm not sure whether you can't get any funding or you can't get as much funding towards your appointments, and so it's quite an expensive option, especially when you add in tests and things like that, compared to going to see a GP. So it's really, it feels like it's it's exclusive as well, which is obviously not helpful and not what we should be having. But when I grew up in the UK, I'd never even heard of a naturopath until I came to Australia. I had no idea what it was. I was like, oh, what? What is this? It just was not something that, I don't know whether that's just my family, my community, like my upbringing, that why I'd not heard of it, or I'm sure there are naturopaths in the UK, but it just was absolutely not part of the kind of language or the options, like the map of getting health. So yeah, I think it definitely seems to be different depending on where you are. So I would love to ask if somebody is wanting to take some first steps, getting support with their PMDD, and you've been listening and you're like, I want to speak to Jes. I want to contact you and get some help. Like what would be the first steps? Where can people find you? Are you happy to share?
Sure. So I have a website. It is hermoodmentor.com, and there's lots of information there. I'm also most active as far as social media goes on Instagram, sharing educational content. And there's a link under my bio that will take you to a lot of freebies that you can kind of get started in working towards reducing and managing your PMDD symptoms through Instagram or my website. You can also book a free consultation where we chat about your experience, what you've tried, and maybe how I can help. And yeah, my DMs are always open. So I'm always in the DMs chatting with people about what they're experiencing and what options are out there, and that it still is hopeful for them regardless of how it feels in the moment.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'll pop all of your links in the show notes as well. So if you're listening and you just want to click through, go find the show notes. Thank you so much, Jes. I've really, really loved chatting to you and, hearing your story. I'm so grateful for you to share that and, educating us as well. And I just really hear your passion for taking this holistic approach, this integrative approach. And I love the way that you spoke about our kind of evolution of it as well. Like that just makes sense to me. Like, how we're meant to be and how we're not meant to be, and like what normal is and not normal is. And yeah, I think that just gives a real sense of we're not meant to be experiencing these things. So if I guess if somebody's curious even about finding out if they've got PMDD for sure, like you'll be able to help with that as well. So go over and find Jes. Thank you for your time with us.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you for having me. It's been such a lovely time chatting with you. Really happy to be here.
Thank you so much for listening in. If you're loving this podcast and you'd love to help me spread the wisdom shared, please leave a review or rating, or share this with somebody who you think would love to listen in. I'm really passionate about creating ripples of change and getting this information to more women, girls, and people with a cycle so that they can reclaim their cyclic natures too. And if you'd love to dive in deeper with learning more about how to connect with your cycle and rites of passages, come and join our free Wild Flow Circle community, or choose a course and learn with me on my online learning hub. All the links are in the show notes. And until next time, be well and go with the flow of your cyclic nature.